in the middle of a new theme. We've started a new theme for the new year, which is called Head, Heart and Guts, Total Transformation. So it's a theme that's going to be looking at the transformation of our whole being. The Dharma, Buddhism, is about the transformation of our whole being, so that our rational mind, our head, our emotions, and our guts, our deeper drives and volitions. And we're exploring these three aspects of our being and of transformation using archetypal figures, three Bodhisattva figures, archetypal figures. So we heard from Vedanya about Manjushri, or Manjughosha, the gentle-voiced prince, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. And we're in this first part of the series, we're going to be looking at wisdom, transforming our mind, our views, liberating ourselves through wisdom. So we heard from Vedanya how we're protected by wisdom. These three figures are called the family protectors, and it seems like a bit like a mafia term, the kind of protectors of the family. But you can see, well, they protect the Buddha's family, they protect Sangha. We are part of the Buddha's family, we are practitioners of the Buddha's teaching, so we get protected by these three figures. So wisdom protects us, and we saw that wisdom cuts us free like a sword. Manjushri has a flaming sword that just cuts through mind-made manacles, mind-forged prisons, the views about the world or ourself that imprison us and restrict us or limit us. The perspective of wisdom cuts through those and liberates us. So Manjushri's sword is so sharp it cuts through these wrong views without causing injury. And we saw last week from Satyajoti that one of the core expressions of wisdom of the Buddha's core teaching on wisdom is called Praticca Samutpada, which is written here. And it's also carved in wood beautifully down here, the phrase in English. And it can be translated as conditioned co-production, conditioned co-arising. But very, very briefly, it's how the Buddha described that everything we experience arises out of conditions, and when those conditions cease, those phenomena cease. And we also saw that everything that arises is a condition for something else that arises. So there's just this flow of conditions, and within that flow nothing stays the same, there's just constantly changing conditions. And all the conditions are interacting with the things around it, conditioning other things. So there are no things being conditioned, there are only conditions, we saw. And there are no things that change, there's only change within this constant flow of conditions interacting with other conditions. And we also saw that because we don't understand this principle, this teaching, the way things are, that causes us to suffer. We suffer because of this. We don't understand, we don't grasp the way things are, this teaching. So very briefly, this is the area, the territory of the three lakshanas that Satyajoti talked about last week. Anicca or impermanence, anatman or lack of inherent self, interconnectedness, and dukkha or unsatisfactoriness. And we'll be hearing more about these next week. Three people will be talking more about their experience of the three lakshanas next week. But this evening I'm going to be looking at wisdom, and in particular how wisdom can free us, it can liberate us, and particularly the teaching of karma, the law of karma, how that can liberate us from the bonds of the past. We can be trapped in the bonds of the past, and the law of karma, the wisdom perspective, can liberate us from those bonds, liberate us from the past. And what I'm going to explore is how wisdom can make us like magicians. With a wisdom perspective, we can be like magicians, we can be creating the future, creating our own future, using the law of karma. I'm going to explore two verses from the Dhammapada, which for me are two of the most important, if not the most important verses in Buddhism. So I'll be using those verses from the Dhammapada to explore that. So karma frees us from the past. It frees us from the past and enables us to create our own future. So what is karma? What is the law of karma? What is karma? So there's a popular view of karma, which is that karma is in a way, it's about the past. It's us getting our comeuppance. We've been a naughty boy or a naughty girl, and we're getting our just rewards, we're getting our kind of comeuppance. So karma, this view of karma, very much sees it about things we've done in the past and experiencing the fruits of that. Some famous kind of examples of this expressed in our culture. So quite a long time ago now, it was current when I was growing up, but there was an England manager called Glenn Hoddle who unfortunately lost his job, and it was because he made a controversial claim. I think he was Hindu, but he claimed that disabled people were basically being punished for things they'd done wrong in their past life, something along those lines. And then there's also, when there was the tsunami, I think in Sri Lanka, there was some Tibetan teachers claiming that this was a result of karma, collective karma. The people of Sri Lanka were receiving the fruits of collective karma. So I want to be really clear that that's not the Buddhist take on karma. That isn't the Buddhist take on karma, just be really clear about that. That isn't the Buddhist teaching on karma. Karma is one dimension of, one expression of this teaching of conditioned co-production, this flow of conditions. It's one area where we can explore conditionality. But there are other aspects to conditionality, other dimensions to it. And conditionality isn't random, it's a principle that you can apply to any area of your experience, any aspect of reality. So if you take a phenomenon like a natural disaster, an earthquake, I'm not a geologist, but I understand that earthquakes are usually caused by tectonic plates kind of moving deep below the surface of the earth. There's not really anything to do with collective karma from the village, it's just tectonic plates as I understand it. So the Buddha was really clear, he's very clear that things that happen to us, they're not the result of karma, everything isn't the result of karma. And there's a Buddhist commentator a few hundred years after the Buddha lived called Buddhinaga, and he expanded this further, he made this more clearer. So Buddhinaga produced this list called the 5 niyamas. Basically means 5 categories, 5 kind of regularities. So you could see this flow of conditionality, this flow of conditions. It kind of loosely arranges itself into kind of 5 categories, kind of five regularities. And the first 3 of these are what we probably would now call the laws of science. You've got Utu niyama, which I was getting confused with Uju, which is a character from the Octonauts, if anybody knows CBeebies. My son likes the Octonauts. So it's not Uju, it's Utu. And then Biju and Mano, Karma niyama and Dharma niyama. So the first 3 of these are very, very briefly, very roughly, the laws of science. So you've got the first niyama describes the physical laws, things like gravity, thermodynamics, kind of the physical laws, chemistry. Then you've got Biju niyama, which describes more the kind of the way that living beings are conditioned. So you've got biology, other things like that, physiology. And then the third one, Mano niyama, are the kind of the regulations or conditions from social sciences. And you could say like it's instinct, it's the way we perceive things, is the kind of the way that we interact as beings. And Satyajoshi talked last week about conditioning, like we have certain ideas because of the culture we grew up in. There's this kind of social conditioning, you might call it. None of these are to do with karma. So, say for example, most of the things that happen to us can be explained by these 3 laws. They're not necessarily to do with karma. So if you feel unwell, it could be a physical thing. It could be the position of the moon right now. It could be that the temperature's dropped suddenly and you've caught a cold. It could be a virus, it could be a chemical thing from the second class, it could be a virus that you've caught, or a chemical deficiency in your body. It could be chemical reasons why you're feeling unwell, why you're suffering. It could also be that you're suffering because of this Mano niyama. It could be suffering because someone's been just really, really unkind to you. Or just someone else is causing you a lot of sadness. It could be suffering. Yeah, it's not your fault. It's not karma. It's not to do with your fault. It's just the way things are. It's nothing to do with your karma. So hopefully, I've made that really clear. And the Buddha taught that only an enlightened being can look back and just tell if what's happening to somebody is because of karma. Only an enlightened being can tell that. We can't possibly tell that. So there's just no practical use in trying to explain things through karma. It's just impossible, really. It's not really helpful. It's not what karma is about. karma isn't about the past, karma is about the future. So the title of this talk is Creating the Future, and that is how we use the law of karma. In other words, how will my response now to this situation create a more positive or negative future for myself? Will the decision I'm about to make, will that create more suffering, or will it reduce suffering for me and others? And that's how we use the law of karma. It's nothing to do with the past, it's about the future. So, yeah, karma isn't used to explain the past, but it's used to free us from the past, to liberate us from the past, as I'll explore. It's about changing our future, but in this lifetime, moment-to-moment growth and unfoldment, achieving our potential. That's what karma is about. So I'll illustrate this a little bit with a myth really from the stories of King Arthur. So there's a figure called Merlin the magician, you'll all be familiar with. And I just discovered this from a talk from Bodhinaga a few years ago, but apparently in the Arthurian legends, Merlin starts off as an old man. He begins life as an old man, and then he gets progressively younger. As time passes, Merlin gets younger and younger and younger, which is really curious. What is that saying? What is that illustrating? Why does Merlin get younger? So I'll explain that in a second. But usually, we're trapped in our past. We're living out our past again and again and again. And we assume that we can't change. This is how I am. So I've always been an irritable person, for example, and I can't change. I'm just an irritable person. That's how I am. And we just live that past out again and again and again. I've always been afraid of conflict, so I'm never going to be the kind of person who can speak out, and that will never change. So our future is determined by the past, and we're locked in this course that's never going to change, just on and on and on. And you can see this, they've got some flip charts from our beginner's course which explain the kind of really key, potent messages of the Dharma. That our present is ruled by our past, our future is ruled by our past. It just goes round and round, repeating itself on and on and on. So I had a significant glimpse into this, kind of insight into this shortly before I became a Buddhist actually. And I was sitting in Newcastle. I used to work in an advertising agency. I remember sitting at my desk, and my boss sat at the desk next to me, and his boss sat at the desk next to him. I remember just kind of glancing at them and just getting a vision into my future, just seeing what my future was going to be, basically. And they both worked really hard. I worked really hard. They worked really hard. Their lives just seemed really empty, and they seemed stressed. They didn't seem happy. And basically, the tasks that they were doing every day were quite similar to the tasks that I was doing every day. I could just kind of look ahead and just predict pretty much what I'll be doing day by day in 10 years' time and 20 years' time. And I was also doing the kind of things society say will make you happy. I had a really long-term girlfriend, I had a mortgage, we had a couple of dogs. Basically, we were set to get married. It all just looked really, just in a sense, I had this in that moment, sat at my desk, just a glimpse into my future. And it felt like I was on these train tracks that were heading in a particular course. And didn't seem like any escape from that. It's like I was a passenger on this train. I was just going in this particular direction, locked on this particular course. And basically, the boss and his boss next to me weren't a good advert for that future. Basically, it was a bit of a wake-up call. I just thought, this isn't for me. I need to get out of this. I need to kind of get off these train tracks somehow. So, yeah, it's illustrated, by the wheel of life. We get locked in these kind of same old patterns, just repeating the same things over and over again, living out our past, and we just get trapped in the same ruts that get deeper and deeper again and again and again. Luckily, I was helped out in that situation. It seemed almost like the universe helped me out, because the situation changed. It wasn't really my doing, but my girlfriend at the time ended the relationship. And I was devastated. I was really devastated by that turn of events. But it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me. Because alongside this glimpse of my future career, I was able to do something different. And I realised I wanted to get out of it. And a friend said, well, why don't you go travelling? And it was just doing something different, something that took me off that course, those train tracks. And it opened my life up. I just began this adventure into the unknown. My life was open. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what the future was going to be. So we look again on the beginner's course, you just do something different and you get off that kind of wheel and you start to create a new self, a new world, a new future. So, yeah, I was lucky, I escaped from the past, those train tracks, and a new future started to open up. But we can go even further than that, we can do better than that. So we can become magicians, like Merlin, go back to Merlin now, just connected back up to Merlin. We can be magicians, we can create the future, we can shape the future. So we can begin, rather than being dictated by the past, we can actually start with a vision of our future selves. We can start off with a vision of who we'd like to be in the future. And then we can work backwards, we can live backwards from that future self. And we can decide to act now in a way that will create that future person. We can use the law of karma to act now in a way that will create the person we want to be. So like Merlin, we start with our future selves and we work backwards from that. We live backwards from that and we create the future. We can be magicians and actually create our own future using the law of karma. So this is how we use the law of karma to liberate us from the past. We become freed of the bonds of the past and we can create an exciting future. And for Buddhists, the Buddha is the role model, and I'm probably unethically standing in front of the Buddha right now as I give the talk, so I'll just step aside a little bit so you can see the Buddha more. And the Buddha is our vision of our future selves, who we could be in the future for Buddhists. The Buddha is a human embodiment of the ideal of enlightenment, the ideal human being with complete, total clarity of vision and wisdom, a boundless heart with unbounded love for all beings, and just endless creativity, completely endless energy and creativity. And of course, the 5 precepts give us the guideline as to how to behave now to bring that about. We can become magicians. If we follow the 5 precepts and live by them completely, we will create a Buddha. We will create a Buddha in this lifetime. We will become a Buddha. That's guaranteed. And we become magicians, but it's not a magic trick or illusion. It's just a law of reality. So just like these other laws, the law of gravity or thermodynamics or the other laws of science, the law of karma is just part of reality. And if you create the conditions, it will arise, just like any other law of conditionality. If you create the right conditions, a Buddha will arise. Yeah. So the law of karma, this 4th niyama, it's not necessarily a law of science, but it's a law of consciousness. It's an ethical law. And it describes and it governs how our actions now and our intentions condition and our choices. They condition our level of consciousness. It produces a different state of mind, a different level of consciousness. And that conditions how we experience the world. So we've got these very brilliant flip charts that we use again and again on the beginner's course. Our actions, our state of mind, our personality, is conditioned by our behaviour. And that then, our state of mind, conditions how we experience the world. So this is the law of karma, and it's just as much a law of nature as the law of gravity, or the other laws of science that I don't know about. And this is encapsulated, the law of karma, and basically the whole of the Dharma is encapsulated in the first 2 verses of the Dhammapada, which for me are the most important. I think I'm going to say that the most important verses of Dharma, and I'd encourage you to learn them by heart. I learned them by heart a while ago, and it's been really, really invaluable. So I'm going to read them out. Oh, this one's signed by Sangha, actually. I just took that one from the library. That feels particularly special. Sorry, I didn't find the page, and I should have done this earlier. So the first 2 verses of the Dhammapada. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox, drawing the cart. And the second verse. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows, like a shadow that never departs. Yeah, so that first verse There's two parts to those verses. There's the first part, our experiences are preceded by, led by, and produced by our mind. So I'll come back to that, but in effect this is the second part here, that our experience of the world is preceded and led by and produced by our state of mind, which is a significant thing for the Buddha to say, and I'll come back to that later. But the first part I want to explore first is that if you speak or act with an impure mind, an unethical mind, then suffering will follow, just like a cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox pulling the cart. So you get this image of suffering, just digging yourself deeper and deeper into a rut. It's like dragging a really heavy load behind you, an ox just pulling this really heavy load, and this wheel of the cart just going round and round and round, digging grooves into the earth. So you get this really powerful image of suffering and how our actions can create these habitual ruts that just go deeper and deeper, round and round like a wheel. So if we act unethically, it creates a negative state of mind and we suffer. And these processes are built into reality. It's not that we're being punished by God. It'd be like saying that gravity is punishing you for jumping upwards. Gravity doesn't punish you for jumping upwards. It's just conditions. It's the law of gravity. You fall back down again. And it's just the way things are. If you jump up, the law of gravity describes how you fall back down. And if you act unethically, it's not that you're being punished, but the law of karma describes how you will suffer. You will experience suffer. Your state of mind will change, and you will suffer. Your consciousness will contract. It will become less connected with reality. And you'll become less connected with yourself and the world around you. So for me, just been reflecting on my own experience of acting unethical, which is vast actually. I've got a lot of experience of acting unethically, I'm sure you all have. And each time I unknowingly break one of the precepts, it creates a kind of schism within me. It's like I go against a part of me and that knows it's the wrong thing to do, and it's painful. It creates a schism. It creates suffering. Deep down, I know the best way to act. And this is shown by the precept exercise we do again and again on the intro course. There's universal principles. We all know the best way to act, the kind of healthy way to behave, the ethical way to behave, but time and time again we go against that. And at a deep level, it creates an agitation in our mind. Our mind is unsettled. There's a schism, our mind is agitated. It's not at ease. And we have a kind of guilty conscience at some level almost. And also this experience cuts us off from the experience of a Natman we heard about, interconnectedness. It's as though we are acting unethically, we're acting in a way that's going to harm other people or harm the world. It cuts us off, creates a barrier between us and the world, and that creates suffering, that causes suffering. Yeah, so there's this heavy burden of suffering that we carry around with us when we act unethically, like the ox pulling this heavy load. And we live it out again and again, repeating the same mistake again and again, like this heavy wheel we're pulling behind us. Whereas if we act ethically, the Buddha tells us, happiness will follow, like a shadow that never departs. So if we act ethically, there's a joy that comes with living ethically, just living from your values and your principles. There can be a real joy at leaving behind unethical ways of living and just being free of them, letting go of that burden. And it has a feeling of expansiveness. Your consciousness feels expansive. You feel content. You feel whole. Don't feel like in a schism or unease. You just feel content and joyful. So the shadow might not be as easy an image to kind of relate to. But if you're in India and it's burning hot, well then shade will provide relief. There'll be relief from suffering. And there's that shadow is like that you can connect with. There's just a relief with shade. And there's the lightness, there's no effort in the shadow, it just follows you. It's like a trail of joy behind you, that happiness will just follow you like a shadow. You don't have to do anything, it just there's no toil like pulling a wheel. So the question arises, well, why don't we just act skillfully all the time? If this is the route to happiness and we know it, and it's this straightforward, why aren't we just ethical all the time? Why aren't we Buddhas right now? Why don't we do it? And I think this connects back to something that Satyajoti was talking about last week. Satyajoti talked about suffering and our responses to suffering. And she talked about first arrows and second arrows. So for those of you who missed it, I'll briefly recap. Yeah, Our unskillful behaviour is a response to suffering. It's a kind of an impulse to suffering. We experience pain, we experience dukkha. And that's caused by our usual way of living, but changing just seems too hard, and we want a quick fix. We want to either distract ourselves from the suffering. So our response is to either crave some kind of pleasure, distract ourselves from the experience. But there isn't a quick fix really. It's just trying to get something, looking for an external solution. It doesn't work. It just, acting from craving makes it worse. I know this from my own experience. I'm sure you do as well. If you act out of craving, trying to just distract yourself with craving, it creates more suffering. It just creates a deeper schism within you. The suffering just gets worse, and then there's a more intense experience of suffering and a more intense craving response. It just fuels itself. You end up suffering more intensely, and your response, you've got this kind of habitual response to try and grab pleasure, and then it creates more suffering, and then you just need more pleasure. And you just see how easily addictive cycles become traps, and you get trapped in this addictive cycle, which creates more suffering, and then you need more relief from it. And you could also see how we do this with blame as well, and anger. Our response to suffering might be just to, again, look for an external solution. Somebody else is to blame for my suffering, and we just place the anger and the blame out there. It just feels like a quick fix, an easy solution. But the Buddha said anger is like picking up a hot coal. It's going to harm you. Anger will harm you. It's like picking up a hot coal. You get harmed by it. So, I talked earlier about suffering isn't the response, isn't our fault of karma. But there's a particular type of suffering which is the fruit of karma. So whatever happens initially, it might be a cold, it might be the first arrow, it might be a natural disaster, but it might be like a cold, it might be a fever, it might be not getting what you want. It's initial suffering, but our response to it creates a second arrow, it creates more suffering. And then we're trapped in a cycle of deeper suffering, and we respond again unethically, and it creates more suffering. Before we know it, we're in a world of pain, we're just trapped in this world of pain, locked in this cycle. So maybe that's why it's not so easy to kind of act ethically all the time. We've got this momentum of habits that and we're looking for a quick fix to get away from suffering. And we've also got the kind of very convincing voice of what Buddhists call Mara, the bit of us that's resistant to change, just whispering in our ear at those moments. It's going to be okay. This time, it's not going to hurt anybody. Whatever it is that you're about to do, it's fine. There won't be any bad consequences this time. I know there was last time, but it's going to be fine. It's not going to hurt anybody. And it's just very easy just to go with that. Whatever your equivalent of it is, it's not going to hurt anybody. And of course it does. You just end up in this cycle. You're back in it. But there is an ethical choice. There's an ethical choice in those moments. With the gap, with mindfulness and awareness, we have an ethical choice. And you can remember from the beginner's course again, whichever we choose, whichever strand of our being we choose to act on gets stronger. We strengthen that particular aspect within ourselves, the ethical or the unethical. And it becomes, it creates our future personality. We act out those strands in the moment. In the present moment, we have a choice. And we're either going to strengthen our skillful strands or unskillful strands. And we're creating our future self, our future personality. But we get addicted to the behaviours and the states that cause us suffering, and it's difficult to see a way out, but it just seems so comfortable and so familiar. It's difficult to kind of change, is difficult. And there was a story I heard about in our chapter meeting yesterday. We were talking about this in our chapter meeting yesterday, and I heard a story from Bodhinaga actually, and it was that sick chickens make bad decisions, basically. So the headline is "Sick chickens make bad decisions." And apparently this comes from a very unethical experiment on chickens in the past. And they were fed by scientists some food that was poisonous to them, contained some toxins, and it made them ill. So after a while, these chickens kind of had been fed on this food for a while that made them unwell. And after a while, they were then presented with healthy food. They had the choice between healthy food and unhealthy, the food that made them sick. And they would always go for the unhealthy food, the food that made them sick. They didn't want to eat the healthy food. They made bad choices. And we're the same as those chickens. We get into negative states of mind, and we choose the things that cause us harm, that are toxic to us. We choose actions and behaviours that we kind of know are going to be harmful to us, but we We make bad choices. Sick chickens make bad choices. So that's that. One part of those verses, the Buddha talks about how if we speak or act with an impure mind, suffering will follow, like the hoof, the wheel follows the hoof of the ox pulling the cart. But if we speak or act with a pure mind, a skillful mind, happiness follows, like a shadow that never departs. So that's the kind of the ethical part of it. But there's also the first part of those verses, very, very significant. The Buddha says, experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. Experiences are preceded by mind, so mind comes first. They're led by mind and produced by mind. So what the Buddha is saying is everything you experience is produced by your mind. Your mind comes first before that experience, and your mind leads and produces that experience. So in other words, the state of mind, your level of consciousness, determines the kind of world that you live in, the realm that, in Buddhism we talk about living in particular realms, worlds that we create from our states of mind. And it's our inner world, our state of mind, our level of consciousness determines how we experience the world. We kind of know this as well, we've experienced this, and you can see around you people in very, very painful states of mind, and they have a really painful experience of life, and some people are in a really joyful, healthy state of mind, and they have a really positive experience of the world. They dwell in completely different worlds, and people can be in the same physical situation, but live just dwelling in a very different world, living in a very different realm. So very much we live in our heads, we live in our mind and our hearts, rather than in the external world around us. And the powerful message of this, well, if we transform our state of mind, if we transform our level of consciousness, the world transforms, the world changes around us. We experience a completely different world. Really, really significant. And probably goes against a lot of kind of conventional views about mind and matter, but the Buddha says mind comes first. It's our state of mind that comes first. Yeah, and we do this very, very potently in meditation. You might have experienced this transformation of your experience of the world through meditation. So for me, meditation is it's an ethical practice, it's a karmic practice. The mindfulness of breathing and metta bhavana are ethical practices. So apparently Sangha said, we don't meditate to have a good meditation, we meditate to change. We meditate to change. So both meditations are karmic practices. When you sit down to do the metta bhavana, each time you're creating new ethical responses, new ethical channels. The Buddha had this agricultural image of irrigators. He said, well, irrigators draw water off in a particular direction. He said, spiritually wise draw their minds in a particular direction, they train their minds. So it's like in the metta bhavana, you're training your mind to flow in a different direction over time. And this takes years and months and years and years and years, but over time, progressively, gradually, you build up momentum, you build up new responses, new ways of responding, new emotions, new states of mind. You transform your mind. So it's not about sitting on the cushion and having a really great blissed out experience of love and feeling all warm and fuzzy. That might happen in the metta bhavana, but it's not what it's about. The metta bhavana is sitting down, really doing work on your responses, your ethic, it's karmic work. And your mind, your states of mind will change dramatically over a period of time. Your relationships with other people will transform dramatically. And you will live in a different world, you'll dwell. Well, the Buddha said, metta is like a heavenly abode, like a Brahma Vihara, a realm of the gods. If you're dwelling in a state of metta, it's like you're living in heaven here and now, you're in a heavenly realm. If you constantly dwell in a place of metta. So in the meditation, you're really potently transforming your mind. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I can remember the very first time I meditated. It was in Sheffield and it was at school. It wasn't too far. I used to go to a Catholic school called All Saints, and it was just behind the train station. It still is just behind the train station. And one day the RE teacher taught us to meditate. I have no idea why he did it, but it changed my life basically. But what I remember about it is that we lay down with this kind of body scan, and it was kind of this bit of a visualisation. Some of my friends fell asleep, some of them got sent out for laughing and messing about. But I engaged with it as best I could. And at the end of it, I came out, and the playground had changed. It was a different playground, and I remember saying to them, what's happened to the playground? The playground has changed. And I didn't understand the relationship between mind and world at that stage. The playground's different. And I knew something had happened. I knew meditation was important from that, and I knew something had happened. But now I kind of understand more how that works. You change your state of mind, and the world seems more vivid. It seems more beautiful, more alive. So, yeah, crucially, when you change your state of mind, the world you dwell in is transformed as well. And when we cultivate ethical states, our mind changes, and the world you dwell in changes. And this is why Buddhist ethics is different from ethics in other religions, as I understand it. The law of karma and Buddhist ethics is different to that. And obviously, so the world, when you change your ethical responses, because of an Atman and interconnectedness, it's going to obviously have an effect on the world around you, a very positive effect on the world around you. But most significantly, it's going to change your state of mind, your level of consciousness, and then you will be dwelling in a different world. That is what the law of karma is about. And that is what Buddhist ethics are really about. It's about an internal transformation. So if I act unethically, I experience this almost straight away. It happens very, very quickly. I can feel tangibly my state of mind contracting. I can feel my being, my level of consciousness kind of contracting and shrinking. And I can tangibly feel that. And in my contracted state, I see the world more through the eyes of my dad, unfortunately. So that's how I relate to it, my inner dad, the strand of me which sees the world like my dad. I can feel myself start to see the world differently. And I see the world through his eyes. I remember one of his early phrases when I started to practice Buddhism was, I'm not eating that veggie shite. That's basically what he said when I first started to practice Buddhism. And that is kind of how my dad sees the world. It's that basically the world is a dead machine. Spiritual practice, it's a nice idea, but it's not going to change anything. And you're going to die, so there's not really any point. It's just a very nihilistic worldview. And from that point of view, spiritual values, the idea of Buddhism, Bodhisattvas, just change, growth, just seems pointless. It's just just that kind of world. It's a very real world, but it seems like a real world. And that's the world most people dwell in, unfortunately. But that kind of, it's just a very painful world to dwell in. I can feel that happen. If I act unethically, I can feel my being kind of contracting, and then, just things like puja just seem like a ridiculous idea. Why would I want to do that? It just kind of, just the Dharma seems just less attractive. But in ethical states of mind, so especially if I'm on retreat or for, particularly potent meditation, I experience the world more how it really is. So I experience myself more deeply connected to the world around me. The world is more alive, more vivid, more alive, and it doesn't seem that different to me. I don't feel that connected from the world around me. So through acting ethically, purifying my own mind, it's like my level of consciousness is raised, and I see reality. I'm wiser. I see reality more clearly. So I see the world more how it is, alive and mysterious, full of potential. So I'm more alive to the influence of reality, you might say. So if I'm part of reality, if I'm not really separate from reality, actually reality is part of me as well, and I'm into reality. Reality is influencing me, you might say. And this leads me on to the fifth of these orders of conditionality, the fifth niyama, what we call the Dharma niyama. And really this is for me what karma is all about. If we act ethically, what we're doing really is creating the conditions for a new form of conditionality to arise. A higher level of conditionality comes into play when you begin to act more ethically. And this is the level of conditionality that describes how Buddhas arise, how human beings become awakened and enlightened. And that comes into play when you're sufficiently ethical enough. That level of conditionality starts to really come to play in your life. But it's there all the time, and it could be, maybe it was a Dharma that just, I like to think, just changed my life, helped me to see things that was a way out of that past. It's as though reality, wisdom Dharma's trying to kind of speak to you all the time. But it's just so faint that sometimes you can't hear it, it's drowned out. But on retreat or in meditation, sometimes the Dharma, you can hear the Dharma. It's like reality is trying to speak to you. So if you align your mind with reality, with the way things are, it's as though the Dharma can arise within us, through us, can express itself through us. Well, I've got this analogy which is like, basically, the Dharma, there's an expression from Sangha Vacchita which is that the Dharma isn't taught. the Dharma gets caught. So I'm trying to teach the Dharma now, but as best I can, and hopefully something else is being communicated. The Dharma gets communicated despite the concepts. The Dharma isn't the concepts, it isn't the words. It's almost like a spirit or a kind of force that's trying to infect us, it's trying to transform us. The Dharma transforms us. And it can't be captured in the words and concepts, but it kind of shines through them. So my analogy is like, well, I'm a mucky window and the sunlight sometimes trying to shine through it. And as you become more and more ethical, it's like you're kind of rubbing some of the muck off that window, and reality can shine through more clearly. And you get around people sometimes, and it's just there's more and more reality shining through them. They've lived a more increasingly ethical life. The states of consciousness have become more and more raised, and the reality shines more lucidly, more clearly through them. But it's just despite my attempts, my flawed attempts to communicate the Dharma, something will hopefully be communicated, something will catch. The Dharma gets caught, not taught. And we can talk about getting enlightenment, but I don't think that we get enlightened. One doesn't get enlightened. It's more that the enlightened mind gets you. The enlightened mind gets you and gets hold of you and transforms you, changes you. Which is maybe a different way of looking at it, but that is my experience, and it's the experience of a lot of other practitioners throughout history. Very experienced practitioners throughout history describe it as though it's reality, it's almost like wisdom is something from outside of their usual experience that arises within them and gets hold of them and transforms them. That's how they describe it. And perhaps a more poetic name for the Dharma Niyama, which isn't a very poetic name, is Bodhicitta, which I really resonate with. And Bodhicitta can translate as the enlightened mind or the heart of enlightenment. So it's as though, so for me, the Dharma reality is trying to wake us up. Reality, wisdom, enlightenment, there's an aspect of reality which wants us to grow, wants us to awaken. It's kind of trying to nudge us in that direction, and we need to be receptive to that. And by being ethical through the law of karma, we create the conditions for that to arise more and more in our lives, and to shine through us more and more, to affect other people. It starts to, other people get attracted to that. Sangharakshita said, well, this is more likely to arise in ethical situations, but it's more potent with a group of people, a community of people acting ethically. So, and this is what we're trying to achieve in our Sangha, is that a community of people acting out of love, acting ethically in harmony. That's really potent conditions for reality to begin to express itself, for the bodhicitta to arise among the community of people, practicing intensely and in harmony and ethically. And that is what our order, our Buddhist order, is about. Really, that is what our Buddhist order is for. It's to try and create the conditions for the bodhicitta, for this reality, the Dharma Niyama, to manifest and express itself in the world and to transform people, to transform the world. That is what our order exists for. We've got these institutions, we've got these buildings, we've got all kinds of stuff, but really what the order is about is to try and create the conditions collectively for the bodhicitta to arise and to transform people, to affect people. And I think that's when if people get that vision, that's when people want to join the order. It's like the order. It's moving from what can the Dharma do for me to more what can I do for the Dharma, what can I give to the Dharma, how can I serve the Dharma. And maybe counterintuitively, the more you kind of give yourself to the Dharma, the more you get out of it, the more you get from it as well, the more your life has changed, the more you get from it. So when I asked personally to join the order years and years ago, it was from this vision of wanting to be part of this project, wanting to bring the Dharma into the world, for it to shine through me and other people collectively and change people. So just to summarise a lot of Dharma that I've said in this talk, we are constantly creating a new consciousness all the time. We're creating a new consciousness. And we're creating a future by our actions right now. And it's either going to be a future which is more deeply entrenched in the past, in past habits, and living out old habits and suffering, or it's going to be a future which is liberated from the past, liberated from the bonds of the past, and free to act in more and more creative ways, more and more ethical ways, and to experience ourselves as more and more connected to ourselves and to the world around us and the beings around us. When we do this, when we act in more and more ethical ways, when we create a more ethical mind, we're actually aligning ourselves with reality, with the way things are. And reality can begin to shine through us like sunlight through a mucky window. And when we come together and practice intensely and in harmony with each other, with others, we create really powerful ethical conditions, really powerful, skillful conditions for the bodhicitta, for Dharma to arise collectively among us. And it's like a beacon that can attract others to it and to transform them. So I'd like to end with an invitation, actually. I'd like to invite you to join us, to join me. If you find that an inspiring vision, I'd like to invite you. You might consider joining us, joining that project, joining the order, and becoming part of that project of serving the Dharma, of trying to bring the Dharma into the world, of affecting people's lives with the Dharma. Thank you. Okay, so we'll do our usual thing. We'll break up into some